Hello and welcome to another This Week in Anthem. The early access launch for Anthem is well underway to a divisive initial launch. People in general are coming heavily down on it being a terrible game or a triumph for BioWare. But if we're being honest, neither of these are true, or in many ways both are. As Anthem hasn't officially seen its release date, I'm going to keep the channel spoiler free until then. So for now, how good is Anthem? What has it got right, wrong, and is it worth the money in its current state? As of right now, I've completed the critical story, all the faction side quest lines, hit 30 and run through all the strongholds. With over 30 hours in game so far, I think I've got a good view on what position Anthem is in. To make this easier to follow, I'm going to break down the core aspects of the game, and I'll post the timestamps below if you're only interested in hearing about one of these parts of the game. Let's start with what BioWare are famous for, the story. In Anthem, the story is broken up into two main segments, the critical path and agent quests. The critical path being the main arc, with multiple agents making up the supporting arcs that flesh out the story missions, including several really good cutscenes, character development for pretty much everyone you encounter, digging into your past and theirs, while progressing the current timeline with your story at the same time. Without spoiling anything, I can say that it has one or two epic moments, both good and bad. The writing is exceptional for all the interactions you have, whether that be within Fort Tarsis or within the cutscenes, with several major battles that I really enjoyed throughout. However, it suffers one glaring issue that undermines the hard work BioWare has put into building the world, characters, and their stories. The flow of the missions is just flat out bad. It starts strong with a fun tutorial mission that you complete solo, with fully scripted segments introducing you to core gameplay mechanics. Leads you into a group play mission, then hits a stumbling block, forcing you into free play to complete a mission so you can learn more about crafting mechanics. But free play removes the essence of polish you can see in previous tutorials. You can then scramble to play any mission which falls onto the agents, before eventually getting back to the critical path missions and more beautiful cutscenes, before once again being forced out into the world and into the agent missions. Fortunately, once you get over this hurdle that cheapens what should be epic reveals, the story picks up again, and you can continue on to the end with several twists and turns, and a final mission that, bar technical issues, I really enjoyed. The story overall is bittersweet, some amazing highs that for many will be ruined by a lack of adequate pacing. It's such a shame to have what otherwise is an engaging story blurred by the attempt to introduce free play elements that should be left for the endgame, not when you're trying to keep a player wanting to press on with a story. As for the missions themselves, well, they follow a similar line. Plenty of high quality, well polished missions rich with lore and exploration of the unknown, mixed with jumping from fetch quests to kill quests to waves of enemies out in the world. Both have their place, but the agent quests especially fall back into a formulaic approach, which is no different at the endgame, while also disrupting the flow of key missions in the critical path. Not to say I don't enjoy the agent missions, I actually do, and taking the time to interact with them and listen to what's going on in the missions is critical, at least for me. The general mission structures themselves can get a bit stale, usually tracking something down, defending it, or clearing out waves of enemies, often a mix of them strung together, which is fine in moderation, but more variety would have helped greatly. Though I must admit I really enjoyed some of the puzzles that are held for special occasions. I want to see more of this type of content, as it's just more interesting than collecting fragments over and over. Your mileage might vary. The more engaged with the story and characters you are, the less likely you are to notice or care. Speaking of which, the best part of Anthem so far has been its characters and the rich lore that has clearly been developed over a long time. Everything in the world has a reason for being there, and if you're willing to look, you'll uncover information on pretty much everything: people, places, creatures, and parts of the environment. The diverse cast of characters especially have been a joy to unravel, starting with the main cast who all deliver excellent performances. The voice acting of everyone you directly interact with is spectacular. The supporting cast of agents also deliver completely, with their own stories, concerns, and motivations that get developed over a series of missions and conversations. In addition to the mission-related NPCs, there are several others you can speak to around Fort Tarsis, who build on the locations. Though not as in-depth, they are a nice distraction from the core stories without sending you out on errands. In most cases, you'll get several options that subtly shape what they do around the fort. Unfortunately, this does not extend to the fort itself. It does change as you progress, but it never really feels alive. It's oddly silent in the busiest areas, and characters never really move around, they just stand around silently. There is a general chatter backing track, but it doesn't match what's going on, and just leaves the area feeling odd if you spend too much time there. It becomes more noticeable the more times you run through the market, which you'll be doing a lot. One of the major issues with the flow carries over to the amount of time you spend going from place to place picking up missions, going back through to launch it, then running back to hand it in, giving you plenty of opportunity to talk to large numbers of NPCs, but sometimes you just want to move on to the next mission, especially once the pace picks up. Out in the world and on missions though, we don't need to worry about any of that, with amazing art making the outer world feel much more alive, screensaver-worthy vistas in practically every direction. Dynamic weather subtly changes the environment, and travelling through the zones is delightful. Once you're used to flying, which on the PC does have much improved controls, you'll be able to travel huge distances, using the sources of water and verticality to really extend your flight times. The combat is something I personally enjoy. Setting up and detonating combos is satisfying and necessary once you move into Grandmaster difficulties. Where the game does have some issues is in its repetitive nature, but that's par for the course when it comes to any looting game. I find these issues more apparent when completing agent contracts, as they follow a very obvious formula. All of them are in 3 stages, where you go collect something, defeat waves of enemies, or fight bosses or creatures of some kind. These activities are fine for the most part, and are a good way to reuse the same spaces for very different encounters. There just needs to be more variety for the endgame. Strongholds, agent contracts, and freeplay is a lot of content, but just like with all the looting games, you will eventually burn out on the same formats. This will be a different amount of time for everyone and is primarily kept alive by the loot grind. You will also encounter a strange take on a catch-up mechanic within missions. As the checkpoint moves forward, anyone not directly on or past it will get a timer. If this reaches 0, you'll be teleported to that checkpoint and trigger another load screen, which in some cases can chain together, missing all the content. This wouldn't be so bad if the ranges on this weren't so short. You'll be able to see the timer within meters of the person in front of you. Easy to fix, but frustrating for sure. I'm only just getting into the last phase of the game with 3 or 4 masterworks equipped as of right now, but I didn't see a single one until I completed the main story and was working towards max level. Normally when you play a season of Diablo, you are likely to see around 5 legendary items during that process, which is much more exciting and puts you in a loot chasing mindset for the endgame. Anthem drops a lot of loot, but it forms a curve, with items between certain ranges nearly always being set colours, closer to how an MMO loot works, not how traditional looting games work. Outside of Anthem's flow issues, its most vocal and glaring faults come in its technical side. In the open and VIP demo especially, these made Anthem almost unplayable, with constant crashes, loading screen freezes, lagging, and random other issues. For the most part, these have been resolved, but not completely. Instead, we have a whole new range of connection issues, one that causes the game to reconnect, kicking you out of whatever you're doing. Primarily this happens in Fort Tarsis, or in loading screens, or just standing around. But you'll be in loading screens a lot, going into the world and back to the fort being the longest. Fortunately, it rarely happens on missions, but when it does, there is a high chance it's going to ruin an important part of the game, as more likely than not, it's going to be in a cutscene, all of which are pretty vital to the story. For me personally, this happened only once, right at the end of the main story, so I missed the last encounter, the cutscene that follows it, and had another bug as a result when I finally got back in. The very last cinematic for the game had all the audio removed, with no context due to the issues from the rest of the mission. Up until this point, I had very much enjoyed the story, despite the technical issues, but I can't help feeling a bit sour about that ending. These aren't the only issues with the game, just the most notable. Enemies on occasion will still phase in and out of place. Certain trigger points in missions won't always activate, including some bosses not just turning up to their own fight. In terms of performance, your CPU is going to get hammered. Anthem uses an excessive amount of CPU power, even while just standing around in Fort Tarsis or the home screen. I suspect the root cause of this issue is the Frostbite engine, as it's very powerful for visuals, but less so on performance. Apparently most of these should be resolved with the day 1 patch coming this week, so until then I'm going to reserve some of my judgment. To bring this together, I want to end on my general opinions of the game and whether I would actually recommend this to anyone. Anthem at its core is a good game. There will be comparisons to other looters like Destiny and Warframe, in addition to older games such as Borderlands. Some fair, some more on the lines of hyperbole. Anthem, in its current state, is not going to be Game of the Year, but it's also not a massive failing. It has issues, that much is obvious. However, BioWare have time to fix them. Most of the technical solutions should be in the game by the 22nd, smoothing out much of that experience, but the issues with flow will still remain due to certain aspects of the mission structure. The story it has is already strong, with the type of storytelling you expect from BioWare, just in a new package. The characters are well written and grow with you, and I found the core story compelling, making me just want to see more of it. It's still early on, so how long the endgame will last could be in the weeks, or if supported well, it could be months or even years. Before then, BioWare need to take a step back and really take into account the mistakes they've made. Expand the loopholes, give access to unique items early on, and smooth out the progression of the story. Personally, I think it would help Anthem if they made completed story missions replayable in full, both so I can go back and replay that final mission with cutscenes, and secondly to increase the available endgame content. When it comes to recommending Anthem, I do, but under a caveat. In its current state, I can't say it's worth $60 for everyone. For me, it has been, but in all fairness, I used the EA Premier Pass for my Acces, and that £15 was well worth it. So that's what I recommend you do. Either wait until after launch and wait for the technical issues to be fixed, or if you really want to play without spoilers, try out the pass, especially if you have no intention of diving into the endgame. Anthem has the potential of a great game, the building blocks are there for it. It's now on BioWare to prove that they are able to iron out those issues and deliver on a game we know they're capable of. Thanks for watching this week in Anthem. If you found this episode useful, please leave a like or a dislike if you prefer. You can support the channel by subscribing and use the bell to be notified of future content as it goes live. Until next time, I've been Dante, thanks for watching.